He was so disturbed by this experience that he tried to hurl himself off a cliff. A few years later, he delivered what are now called the Satanic Verses. So when he was delivering these verses to his followers, he initially revealed verses saying that Muslims could pray to three goddesses, Allat, Alusa, and Manat, and that these three goddesses, we called them cranes, exalted cranes, they would carry your prayers to Allah. But a little later, Muhammad told his followers that these verses, which he had delivered as part of Surah 53, weren't from God, they were from Satan. So Muhammad blamed Satan for tricking him into revealing these verses. So according to Muslim sources, at least on this occasion, Muhammad couldn't tell the difference between something coming from God through the angel Gabriel and something coming from Satan. It's also...
So today I'm going to be making a quick refutation of the Satanic Verses story. So David Wood brings up the fact that the Satanic Verses is mentioned in the Muslim sources. But the Satanic Verses is mainly found in this book. This book, The Life of Muhammad, Sirah Rasulullah by Ibn Ishaq. So this is found, the Satanic Verses is found in Ibn Ishaq's book. But what David Wood is not telling you is that if you read the beginning of this book, The Life of Muhammad, translation by Ibn Ishaq, The Life of Muhammad, on page 36, in the introduction, there are scholars who say that Ibn Ishaq was just writing down anything he heard from anybody. So he wasn't doing kind of fact checking. He was just writing down any story he heard from anybody. So that's why the Satanic Verse. So the Satanic Verses story was just something he was writing down from anybody he heard. He wasn't doing kind of fact checking. If someone told him something, he would just write it down. He didn't verify. He didn't verify whether that story was true or not, or whether that story came from trustworthy sources or not. So on page 36 of Ibn Ishaq's book, he says, there are scholars who say that Ibn Ishaq was just writing down anything he heard from anybody, and Ibn Ishaq wasn't always honest, and he reported a lot of worthless sayings and stories. So Ibn Ishaq is mainly not a reliable book when it comes to the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. But anyways, did you know that even Ibn Ishaq said that the Satanic Verses story is false and it's a fabrication? Abu Hayyan al-Andulasi, who lived in 745 after Hijrah, or AH, after the migration to Medina, he says about this story, Imam Muhammad bin Ishaq, the compiler of Sirah's biography of the Prophet Muhammad, was asked. He said, "This is from the fabrication of the heretics," and he wrote a book on the issue. This is found in al-Bahr, al-Muhit, Tafsir Volume 7, page 526. So even Ibn Ishaq said that the Satanic Verses story is false. Many other Muslim scholars have said that the Satanic Verses story is false, despite them reporting it. So, if you read the history of al-Tabari also mentions the Satanic Verses in the history of al-Tabari, Volume 6, pages 107 to 113. Al-Tabari warns people that his books are filled with authentic and inauthentic stories about the Prophet Muhammad in the history of al-Tabari, Volume 1, pages 170 to 171. Several other Muslim scholars have said that the Satanic Verses story is disconnected, or there's no reliable sources or chain of transmissions for that story. Ibn Kathir says this in Tafsir Ibn Kathir on Quran chapter 22. In Ibn Kathir in his Tafsir Volume 5, page 441 to 442, Ibn Kathir says all the links of this tradition, the Satanic Verses, are unauthentic, and I found no correct version of this with continuous links. Ibn Hajar, Volume 8, page 439, gives reasons why the Satanic Verses story is false. Imam Razi says that the story is false and weak and has disconnected chains of transmission, and it's forged from the heretics, the enemies, the later enemies of Islam. And Tafsir al-Razi on the Quran chapter 22 verse 52. Tafsir is a commentary on the Quran written by classical Muslim scholars. Ibn Hazm also says that the story of the Satanic Verses is false. In Ibn Hazm al-Fas al-Fayil, Volume 2, page 100, pages 308 to 309, 311. So many Muslim scholars say that the Satanic Verses story is false, despite them reporting it. Ibn Ishaq said it's false. Al-Tabari, although Al-Tabari doesn't directly say it, but if you read the history of Al-Tabari, Volume 1, he warns people that his books are filled with weak, inauthentic narrations. And if you look at the history of Al-Tabari, the sources of the Satanic Verses, he names Ibn Ishaq as one of the narrators of the Satanic Verses. But like I said before, Ibn Ishaq declared that the Satanic Verses story is a fabrication, or it's a false story that was passed on to him by the heretics. So basically, people did make up stories about the Prophet Muhammad. After his death, they made up a lot of false stories, and this is one of the false stories that made it into the biographies of the Prophet Muhammad. Even if you read Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Ibn Kathir is the most important Sunni Muslim commentator on the Quran. He even says that story is false in Tafsir Ibn Kathir on the Quran, chapter 22. Now, some might say Ibn Taymiyyah mentions the Satanic Verses, but this is false. Ibn Taymiyyah accepts the Satanic Verses. Ibn Taymiyyah was a classical Muslim scholar, and this is false. Ibn Taymiyyah just said that Satan praised those idols and not the Prophet Muhammad. So even Ibn Taymiyyah in his al-Fatwa states that Satan was the one who was praising those idols, not the Prophet Muhammad. Regardless, the story is false, and it's a fabrication according to the Muslim scholars. According to the Muslim sources that report it, they also report that it's a fabrication and it's false. But David Wood doesn't tell you this because he's ignorant and he wants to spread misinformation about the Prophet Muhammad, or about the spiritual reliability of the Prophet Muhammad. No, Prophet Muhammad was not tricked by Satan. In the early Meccan phase, this is a fabricated story in order to make the Prophet Muhammad look bad, or in order to make the Prophet Muhammad vulnerable to Satan and make him look like he was compromising the message of Islam to appease pagans. So this is a false story. Stay tuned, more videos coming up.